Hi, and welcome to the Reclamation Project podcast. We are so glad you're here, that you're listening, and that you are hopefully a part of the conversation. Our desire is that through this discussion, we would just open up a dialogue between you and us, and you and others, and even possibly you and yourself. And that through all of this, that lives would be changed, that scars would be healed, and that we would all be enriched. Today, we're going to continue our conversation on happiness. We've already walked through an incredible tool, which is cognitive reframing. And while that podcast almost felt like a free therapy session for me, we really feel that it's an important tool for everyone to have and to use, even on a daily basis. As we dive in deeper today, we are going to discuss a key cog in the conversation about happiness, and that is fulfillment and purpose. For my generation, as a kid growing up in the 90s, we had a lot of entertainment that was just felt unfulfilled, from movies to music. I was a big fan of Pearl Jam, and they had songs like Nothing Man and Footsteps, where it was just talking about, don't even think about reaching me. I'm already gone. There's just a huge unfulfilled role there coming through music, to where you had a band called Stone Temple Pilots that had a song called The Big Empty. I think as a generation, we just kind of immersed ourselves in it and dwelled in it. And therefore, as adults now, in this day and age, you almost see still some adults that are unfulfilled, that don't feel like they're happy because of that. To experience long-term happiness, it's imperative that we feel fulfilled in our lives. We must truly feel that there's nothing left to obtain, to reach out for, to stress out about. All that we have and all that we need is already ours. Everything else is just icing on the cake. Obtaining fulfillment, being fulfilled, that's not an easy task. So I guess the first question is, how do we become fulfilled?
That's the $600 million question, Jeremy. And I think maybe sometimes we ask the wrong question, not so much how can I be happy, but what tends to lead us to that place. And I think the two extremes are, in the religious world, you almost felt like you had to be monastic, I really wasn't allowed to be happy. I needed to be holy, and holy and happiness couldn't mix. And then there's some, and you've heard them say it too, like, I think God just wants me to be happy. And I'm not sure that's one of the top three priorities for God. I think he enjoys when we enjoy life. And I think he understands that I create and you create a lot of what our happiness is. So I think that the question we should ask, rather than how do we be happy, is what leads us to those points? Like why do we do the things we do that either end up in happiness or in happiness? So in my coaching and counseling, through Numa Coaching Advantage, my second cheap plug for what I do, I worked through some forms that I've created. And in fact, if you're listening today and they resonate with you, just send us an email. We'll send you a hard copy or digital copy that you can actually have and go through. But I call the first one like the understanding your soul ID. And by ID, I mean these internal demands. God places within us these needs, these longings, these demands that we will meet always, but positive or negative. And the first one is security or certainty. We all have the need to feel secure, to strive for pleasure and to avoid pain, to want to lean into hope. We all have that certainty, the need for it. We'll meet that either positive or negative. I like to use an example. My wife, we've celebrated 41 years of marriage. I am totally certain and secure in her. I always say that if I found her on a bus with the Chippendale dancers, I wouldn't worry one bit. I totally trust her. That is certainty. I might have to get dressed in the next room for a few months, but I totally trust her. That's certainty. Now, there's a negative way to read certainty too, and it happens in a lot of marriages that I counsel. Where are you going? Who are you seeing? Let me see your passwords. Who are you talking to? So in an attempt to attain certainty, you're doing it in a negative way. Chances of reaching any kind of happiness or fulfillment meeting these needs in a negative way are zero. So once we learn how to meet these needs in a positive way, we've increased the likelihood of experiencing happiness and fulfillment. And I say these are soul IDs because what we find out at the end, they can only be truly met in their completeness by God. That's why he implanted them in us. He wanted to show us that you can be as certain as you can on this planet with someone, but I am totally certain because he told me he'll never leave me or forsake me. I'm pretty certain in that. I'm his child. I'm certain of that. So these soul IDs are for us to recognize, we can meet them for our happiness and fulfillment on this planet, but more of all, that he's the only one that can totally meet them. The second one is community and belonging. We all have this inherent need to be a part of something. Genesis 1 and 2, before the fall, God created, and then he stepped back. He said, wow, this is good. But even before sin entered in, there was one not good. He looked at Adam and he said, Adam, it is not good that you're alone. And we were created for relationship, for community, as given evidence by God himself in total communion in the Trinity. God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit lived in perfect communion and relationship, and we were created for that. Now, you can do that in a positive way where I seek out like-minded people, or I decide to be intentional about living life with people, or I can do that negatively. Actually, Jeremy, you were telling me before we went on air, if you remember a story, if you give me it's like a real quick synopsis of the story of a guy in a gang. He was searching for belonging too, but kind of in a negative way. Do you remember the story you were telling me earlier today?
Yeah, recently I was reading just an incredible book called Forgotten God. It's by Francis Chan, and I highly recommend that, by the way.
Great book.
But in one of the last chapters, Francis Chan talks about a guy who came into his church heavily tattooed, came up, introduced himself, talked to him, and this guy said after a couple weeks, he said, I must be mistaken because, what I was looking for was quite different from what I'm seeing. It was, that in a gang, we may, not be good to each other, but at the end of it all, we're family, and we're family day to day, and not just on a Sunday, not just once a week.
So you see that even seeking to meet that need of community and belonging, he was meeting it in a negative way. So we can meet these needs positive or negative. Let me work through real quickly the last few. The next soul ID is significance or purpose. We'll allude to purpose in a little bit, but everyone has this inherent need to feel special, valued, wanted, important, and I can meet that need, positive or negative. I can either create the greatest city in this state, and therefore people look at me as if I'm significant, or I could destroy every other city and be the only one, and now I've met that need in a negative way. If a guy broke into our studio right now and with a gun, Jeremy, he's going to rob us, at that moment he is the most significant person in this room. And he's obtained some sense of certainty. He's got the gun and we don't. And therefore he's meeting a couple of needs in a very negative way. So if we're striving towards happiness and fulfillment, we meet these God-implanted needs in a positive way, we've increased the likelihood that we'll achieve that. The fourth one is love. It's a soul need. God has given us the need to be loved, have someone love us and accept us, and then for us to love someone and have that accepted. And we meet those in positive or negative times. You raised in a good family like you and I both were. We were loved unconditionally. That's a positive way. We were taught that, and hopefully we love our family the same way. Other people who've been maybe abused or rejected, and they go out and they seek love in a very unhealthy way. It's trying to meet that need, but in a very unhealthy way. You find that with a lot of abused girls that end up in prostitution. It's a screaming out, someone just love me, but they're meeting that need in just a negative way. Chances of them finding happiness and fulfillment are very low. The last two are really symptoms of the IDs. Its contribution is one. So God has blessed me with a skill set and a career, and I'm happy where I am. If I'm not contributing to something else, someone else, a different cause, something that's greater than me, I probably won't feel happy. I can do that positive or negatively. I could contribute to someone so that they'll make me look better. That would be meeting a need of significance as well, negatively, to make them think more highly of me, or to maybe I give just so my business will grow. That's a negative way. So again, when we find out why do we do the things we do, I think we have to challenge ourselves to say, what's the end result here too? And if we're meeting needs positively, that speaks well. The last one really is maturation or growth. I can learn negatively or I can learn positively. And just in nature itself, if something's not growing, it's dying. So once we meet all these needs that God implanted us and realize that I can only fully meet them in their completeness in and through God, how could I not feel happy and fulfilled? I mean, I think the way we've always heard it, or you watch movies, we think happiness and fulfillment is just this random, arbitrary thing, when the truth is our hands are on the toggle switch of how we think and what we do that leads to those two things we're talking about.
Yeah, fulfillment is definitely something that's in our hands, it's in our control to a certain extent. It's something that we have buy-in on. But really, when it comes down to it, I believe that fulfillment is also something that you need to learn your purpose to really know what fulfillment truly is.
I know, I agree. I think you can understand your purpose and not be fulfilled because you haven't activated your purpose. But I'm not sure you can attain fulfillment without activating your purpose. I think they work hand in hand, as you said. So we all have unique purposes. You know, what are yours, Jeremy? What purposes do you have?
Well, I feel like there's kind of this overarching purpose of my life. And then there's multiple avenues that I kind of push out and flesh out that purpose through. So I feel like that purpose for my life, and some who know me might not agree completely, but I think the purpose for my life is just a purpose of helping, of serving, of loving on people, encouraging people. And so the avenues that I do that in is kind of threefold that I can at least think of. One is that I'm a father and a husband. You know, I'm there to encourage and to engage and to love on and nurture the relationships with my kids and my wife, and to lift them up and to help them grow and to help them become the best version of themselves that God has created. Second part of me is I manage a fulfillment department, ironically enough, a fulfillment department, which is just a huge mailroom. I work for a company that does fundraising for nonprofit organizations, and nonprofit organizations do some great work of serving and loving people who are disenfranchised. But for my purpose, being there as a part of that department, I feel like my purpose as a supervisor, as a boss, as a manager, is to make the burden of my employees, my staff, lighter.
Yeah.
To be an encourager, to build them up, to grow them, to provide tools for them so that their job is easier, as well as to kind of spread that same encouragement around to the people that I work with outside of my department. The third avenue that I kind of go down with this is just serving people and helping people. My heart is when I see someone who's struggling financially, or just looks down, to actually, you know, have a conversation with them sometimes to help them out with food or with money or whatever I have the ability to do at that point.
Yeah.
There's a great song by a group called Poor Rich Folk, and in it he says, does helping the poor mean anything more than shutting my door and turning away? I believe that's the lyrics to it. But I think that's kind of the heart that God's given me, is to help and to encourage and to love and to sharpen and to help people become better versions of themselves.
So what I hear you saying is, like, your overall mission statement in life and worldview is that, but the way you do it might look different in every avenue of your circumstances of life. And I think that's where we get confused, that we pigeonhole purpose into one specific thing. That's why people live kind of dualistic lives. A pastor, his purpose is to preach, and if he only preaches on Sunday and not with his life on Monday through Saturday, chances of him being truly happy or fulfilled, because just of the dichotomy of his life, that would be anxiousness, I think. And as I heard you talk, I'm thinking, that's probably why we've always connected. I have a lot of the similar things. I love helping people. I was a pastor for 17 years. I've heard it said, once a pastor, always a pastor. I do not like that statement, but that's a personal thing that you can talk to me about off the air. I strive to help people. My wife and I, 41 years of marriage, we've lost 2 children, and we both experienced such great pain, and sometimes people were there for us, sometimes they weren't. I've almost become obsessed from trying to look for people in pain and how do I aid them and help them. And so in the coaching part of my life, I help people who say, I don't know what my purpose is. I couldn't even possibly think about it. I've narrowed it down to really just one thing. I think if you can just answer this one question, you've kind of pigeonholed your purpose. At the end of the day, what is your primary question? My primary question at the end of the day, when I boil everything down, is how can I help people? I mean, it seems simplistic, but if you look at everything that you and I just said, that's one of the core things of it. Now, my wife's different. She had a little rougher childhood and a lot of pain. And I asked her what her primary question was, and I think hers is, how do I protect myself? For someone who went through a lot of pain, and that totally makes sense. So there's not a right or wrong answer to this. It's just to be able to identify where you're at and your purpose. So you could understand why she is really hard driven to help people who are in pain as well, because she knows what that's like. So you gave me a laundry list, Jeremy, some things. Boil your primary question down. With everything you said, at the end of the day, what is your primary question?
I think it is, how do I make people better? How do I make their lives better, their situations better?
Yep. And it's a biblical principle. It's the principle that Barnabas used. He might have not been an eloquent speaker like Peter and Paul, but you know what he was? He was the encourager. And everywhere he went, he encouraged someone and hopefully made their life at least a little more bearable. And so that's kind of the crux of what you do. So we go back to the idea that if you figure out your purpose or your primary question and you live in that, I think you've increased the likelihood of being happy and fulfilled. What do you think?
I think that there's something really to the thought of knowing your purpose and not fulfilling it. And what I mean is I think when you know your purpose and you know what you're supposed to be doing and you're kind of going in the opposite direction, that really brings about a sense of discontent, of unfulfillment. Is unfulfillment a word?
Yes.
Of unfulfillment and even unhappiness with that. I think there's 3 types of people really when it comes to fulfillment. One is the person who knows their purpose but doesn't fulfill it. Mm-hmm. Person who doesn't know their purpose and they squander it. And often I think those times it becomes a point of frustration because you are doing things, but it's just not filling your soul. You're in the wrong place, and that becomes frustrating.
Then you do not feel significant as one of those needs that we said got implanted in us.
Definitely,
yeah,
because you're not fulfilling it. You're not being filled up with that with that desire. And then I think there's people who know their purpose, they know their skill set, they know what they have and what they're supposed to be doing, but they use it for selfish ambition, whether it be to pad their wallet or to see their own satisfaction and success out of it, rather than using it to help others. There's some scripture in the Bible that's in 1 Corinthians 12, I believe, where Paul talks about, you know what, we're all part of the same body. We all have a purpose in that, and we're all different body parts, but when it comes down to it, we're all part of the same body, and all those body parts have to function together and function in a way that's good for the whole body. And you see that evident in Paul's life, where he's talking, I believe it's in either Ephesians or Colossians, I just read it a few weeks ago, where he talks about, you know what, I went up to the apostles, and there was Peter and there was James, and they were speaking to the Jews about Christ and spreading the good news to those people. But at the same time, me, Paul, and Barnabas were speaking to the Gentiles in the same way and spreading the good news there. And while each one of those parts is different and they have the same purpose but a different avenue, they were doing the same thing, and they were of one accord and one mind and one purpose, and they were building up the body together. There are different parts of the body building up the kingdom together. So I think it's good to know your purpose, and it's good to actively engage in your purpose, because we're all uniquely purposed.
Yeah.
We're all uniquely gifted.
Yeah.
You may feel that others can do what you're purposed for better. I've been there before, where I say, "Oh, I'm not as good of a speaker." I mean, Moses. You see Moses, as the burning bush is talking to him. Moses says, "Yeah, how about my brother instead of me? Because I'm not a good speaker."
Yeah.
How many times I've been there? I'm not a good speaker. I'm not a good enough singer when I was doing worship at church. I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at that. Those are just things that keep you from your purpose. Instead, be confident in the gifts and what you've been given, and don't worry about what other people are doing. When you worry about what other people are doing, that's just an avenue for,
Discouragement.
discouragement to come in,
Yeah.
and a foothold for really the devil to push you away from your purpose,
Yeah.
and to keep you away from doing what God has uniquely built you to do, and uniquely put you in the circumstances that you're in
Yeah.
to do. And that's the other thing is, while that person maybe they are better than you at speaking, or maybe they are better than you at whatever it may be. But the thing is God's uniquely put you in a circumstance in the lives of people that you're around to use that purpose, whereas that other person who may be better doesn't have the same avenues, doesn't have the same relationships to utilize that purpose. So God wants to use you in the place that you're at.
Correct.
And use that other person in the place where they're at.
And I think the one word we haven't introduced yet that may tie this all together, especially when you talk about the uniqueness of us, is just contentment. It sounds a lot like happiness, and it sounds in the same ballpark as fulfillment. But if you understand your uniqueness and just live in that, I think you're content. If my expectation is that I'm gonna achieve what someone with a greater skill set has, I could still be activating my purpose, working towards fulfillment, and be not content in my ministry, in my life. So I agree. I think we revel in our uniqueness, because that also is how God hardwired us, each one of us. Ephesians 2 tells us that we are all His workmanship, and He created certain things just for you and for me, and that's what I'm to live in. So when I live in that, and I'm content in that, and I'm activating my purpose, now we've reached that goal that we set out at the beginning of the podcast, is I think we could achieve some sense of fulfillment in that. So I think what we learned today is that when it comes to fulfillment and purpose and contentment, that we are in control. We have a lot of ownership in that. So how do you prime yourself? How do you prime yourself each day to make sure that you're in the place where the things happen? I created this little form called the 7-Minute Soul Satisfier. And again, if you're listening and you'd like a copy, send us your email. And at the end of the podcast, Jeremy will give you all the different ways you can get in touch with us. Send us your email, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that. But I want to go over them really quickly. I do this in the morning kind of as a meditation to prime myself to move in the direction I think that I'm supposed to be moving. Number one is gratitude, the ability to express the feelings of being grateful. So I sit and I recall someone or something where an act of kindness was acted out towards me, and I think about that, and I become grateful for that. I think of ways to become a blessing to people I know or random people. So how can I take that gratitude and give it back? I make a mental list of people in my life and what they mean to me, and I'm grateful for each person and their uniqueness in my life. The second soul satisfier is just forgiveness, and that's just the disposition and intentionality to forgive someone who's wronged you or offended you. So I sit there for a moment and I think about a time that I was wronged or had an offense given towards me. and I forgive that person, which means I release the power they have on me. I'm not going to let them take my focus to the negative side, because I'm going to start to meet those needs in a very negative way. I also think about maybe some bad decisions I've made or some bad choices, and I learn to forgive myself. That's a big one. Some days I just have to forgive myself. I think about those. I think about the consequences. I think about the grace that God gave me, and then I tell myself, you know what, you're forgiven. And then I think, lastly, I think about someone who I've wronged, or maybe I don't even know for sure that I've wronged them, but in my mind, I work through a forgiveness process of how I'll ask or offer to them my forgiveness. The third soul satisfier really is joy, and joy is just simply the motion of the expression of happiness and delight. So I sit and I reflect on some really happy moments in my life, some great experiences, some great relationships, and I revel in those for a minute. And I think sometimes we feel guilty when we experience joy, and I think joy is something God's given us to live in. And in fact, it's interesting because Paul said to, I think it was the church at Colossians, that you are my joy. Other people were his joy. As he thought about them, he reveled in the joy. I think about how I can be a vehicle of joy to someone else that day. And I'm like, God, allow me to bring joy to someone's life today, which not only a good thing to think about, it fits my purpose and my primary question of how can I help people. The fourth one is just love. I think about times when I was unconditionally loved and who loves me, and I think about that and I accept it. A lot of us really just don't accept love. We're good at giving it out. We're not good at accepting. So I think about those who love me, how they do it, and I accept that. I also think about those people that I can love. Not just, the Bible's pretty clear when it says it's easy to love those that love you, but how do you love those that aren't lovely? We all have those somewhere in the continuum of our life, at work, sometimes extended family. So I think about those people like, how can I show those unlovely people love, those ones that are hard to love? The fifth one is really courage, and courage just isn't the absence of fear. It's in the process of fear, feeling strong. And I think about some moments where I shrank back, and I might have wanted to make a statement or to stand up and do something, and I didn't. And I think, what would that look like if I would have instituted or imparted some courage there? I think about other people I know that maybe seem to shrink back, and how can I encourage them to be courageous? Courage is a huge part of my day. 6 is generosity. I think about all those people who've been generous to me, and what they've done for me, both either financially or emotionally, mentally. And I just think about what that meant to me. Then I think about people who come across my life, and how can I be generous to them? And that's just not financial. It may be, as Jeremy was saying, just a word of generous encouragement. So I think about those in that minute of each one, and now my brain is primed for the day. And of course, the last one is hope. And hope is just a feeling that what I want or need will eventually come to be. And there's an active hope that requires some ownership. And hope really gives feet to dreams. And I think we've kind of been taught we shouldn't dream. It's selfish to dream. And I don't think God would allow us to dream a dream that we've had if he hadn't also given us the capacity to meet that dream. So I close my eyes and I dream big and say, God, if this finds favor in you, I'm hoping towards that dream. I'm going to use my skill set, my uniqueness, my purpose, and fulfill this dream. So I do those, not every morning, but I try to do them a few mornings a week. And I think I primed myself to go out, fulfill my purpose, reach for contentment and happiness. So again, if you want a copy of this, listen to Jeremy at the end of the podcast. He'll give you a way to get a hold of us, and we'll make sure that you get a copy.
And that's our hope and our prayer today, is that through today, through this week, through whenever you're listening to this, that you would really understand your purpose, that you would really engage in it and seek it out in every place in your life. I think that's key, is you can use your purpose in everything that you do. So using that purpose, knowing it, and then being content and fulfilled by it. And that's our hope, is that those things happen for you this week. Thanks for listening. We want to hear from you. We want to hear, if you have feedback, if you have questions, if you just want to discuss more of this with us, you can do that in a couple different formats. If you want to get the forms from Gary, you would also be able to use these formats to get those as well. And those are, first of all, our website, rppodcast.com. You can always contact us there. There's a contact us tab on there, as well as we are on Facebook at RP Podcast. We are on Instagram at RP Podcast, and we are on Twitter at the RP Podcast as well. Thanks for listening. We are so glad that you did, and hopefully this just sets you off in a good place today and throughout your week. Have a good one.